using Azure. So you should know what the service is and what function does it do. Like that, you should know for each and everything. Like I was telling you, is it as it is a fundamentals, you're going to know what it will do, but you are not going to get in depth of these things. The same way, when you go to the compute, what is it? And what service name, what service function it is. Networking also, you should know what service name it has and what service function does it do. So these are all very important because they're going to ask you questions like Azure Virtual Network, what is it? So you should be able to tell that it is actually used to connect VMs to the incoming virtual private network connections. At the same point of time, they'll be asking you these questions on use case basis also. That we're going to explain you how they're going to ask you. But that's why it's very important for you to understand all these terms. Azure Blob Storage, what is it used for? Azure File Storage, what it will do, what is queue storage, and what is the table storage. So you need to know about all these things, very important. And different databases, what their service functions. And and you all have to read this, very important. After the classes is done, you have to prepare. There is no choice. You read this content, you prepare, then only you will be able to clear the exam. I'm telling you very clearly. So you need to know, get started with Azure accounts. So students, this is where now we have to do. Get started with Azure accounts. When you can click on continue, now you have to create your Azure account. So what should we do to have an Azure account? Okay, basically to create and use any Azure services, you would need an Azure subscription. That is one thing which is required. But before you need a subscription, you go for a subscription, you need an Azure account. So we're going to see that you're going to have an Azure account. See, this is a process of creating an Azure account. You can purchase Azure access directly from Microsoft, or you can also go through this video and see and get a free account also. If you play this particular video, it will explain you everything about how you create it, but I will also show you how this can be created. So when you create Azure free account, what all actually included for you is important for you to know. Free access to the popular Azure products for 12 months, a credit to spend for the first 30 days, access to more than 25 products that are always free. So you have to create an Azure account, free account, which is very important. And to create an account, you don't need any credit card, but when you go to the subscriptions, you have to actually apply your debit card or credit cards, which is going to charge you 2 rupees. For that 2 rupees, they will give you 14,500 rupees credits. They will give it to you, which you can use it across this particular training to use that, because you don't need to spend more than that. And it is only going to cost you 2 rupees to validate the debit card or credit card. That's it. For a free student account, it gives you 100 credit dollars, but for student account, it's difficult because it is going to ask for the verification, and we don't have that verification time to do with the university right now or college. So what should be done is we will go create an account and we'll see how that can be done. So everyone, now please follow my instructions. And I'll ping you the link also, portal.azure.com. You need to go into this particular site. Let me click again for you. This is the link. Students, there is a YouTube live channel that is being shared by Chaitanya. Please give it to your friends who wants to share this link to the friends who are not able to join these classes. Please share them the link. There's a live going on. Please share that link. Please share this link. There's a good question. What's the difference between AWS and Azure? We're going to talk about those differences also, Shiva. Give us some time. Once we get into the concepts, we'll do that. Okay. So now everyone, please. Yes. Yes, sir. Even your faculty, you can go through it, sir. Yes, sir. Students, please go to the portal.azure.com, the site that I've pinged you. Again, I'm pinging it here, portal.azure.com. Please click on that particular URL. Once you click on that particular URL, if you have an account, it is going to ask you to redirect to that particular account. If you don't have an account, for me, I'm just clicking on it because I have an account already. It will log in me into it. But for whoever doesn't have an account, kindly please create an account with the same email ID that you used to create the Microsoft Docs account. Please create an account with the same email ID that you provided for the docs.microsoft.com account that you created just few minutes back. Please go create account on portal.azure.com. For now, just create an account. Do not worry about subscriptions. Just create an account. Everyone, just go create an account and just ping me saying whether you have done it or not. Everyone, I already got 2, 3, 4 people replied. So please go create accounts. Everyone has to create the accounts. Super good. Good. Everyone are creating account. Done. Good. So once an account is created, okay? Once an account is created, now what we have to do is, let me share my screen back. As soon as you create an account, you log in. This is how you're going to see your account. This is how your account will come. For me, it is free trial because I've already subscribed. For you, you will not get this one as of now. I will tell you how to get this one also, but you will see all these services. So when you log in, there are a lot of services that you will have. Like we are talking about the general one, and then you go to compute. So I was talking about the compute, right? When you go to compute, these are all different kinds of things that are there. But you need to learn what are very important for you now for at this point of time, based on this particular one, like tour of Azure services, as we said. So when you go through this, we said about compute. These are very important for you now. These are important for you now at this point of time. Azure virtual machines is something which is required. So this is Azure virtual machine for you. You can go create that. All we're going to talk in the next few minutes. Okay, don't worry about that. But first, create the account and keep it. You should have an account and you should keep it ready, because the trainer who's going to come in, he's going to start directly with these things. That's why you need this. So this is virtual machine. The same way when you talk about the virtual machine scale sets, you're going to have that about the virtual scale sets. You're going to have the app services, the cloud services, and then availability sets. And then it is about networking. You should know about these concepts. That's what I'm telling you. Virtual networks, the same way like how we're going to talk about here. Sorry. Yeah, networking. You have to know about virtual network, load balancer, application gateway, VPN gateway, DNS, content delivery network, and then DDoS protection, traffic manager, all this. You should know what all these things will do. So if I go and click on DDoS protection plans, you should know, you click on it, you should know what exactly it will do. That's it. That's very important for you as of now. You don't have to get into detail of this thing, but you should know what is this DDoS protection is all about. The same way when you go to the storages, You should know what are different kinds of storages that are available and what you do with storages and what are they important for. Okay, so this is how you're going to have your account. Okay, and then I'm just going back here. Once your account is also created, which is the next step which we went through, most of you created the accounts, and you and when you start learning on the sandbox, there's a unique use case that will be there. So the trainers is going to explain you about multiple use cases. Also, you should be able to read these use cases also. When you go through this use case, there's going to be a couple of readings that you will do, and then you have to do a knowledge check. You will read this particular, so that is how the questions will come to you. This is how they'll give you the complete use case, and then when you go and do the knowledge check, that is where you're going to get questions to answer this particular one. That's how you're going to finish each module, and you're going to finish it off. So it is very important that you go through the complete case studies, finish off, and see whether you are able to answer it or not, and check the answers. That's how you have to go through each one of the modules, and then once you finish the core concepts, the introduction to cloud computing, okay, you need to go back to the main AZ900 to go to the second level that you have to do, which is the second module. So module by module, you should finish it, and then you do a knowledge check. As I said, once you finish this one, when you click on start, you're finishing all these three modules. Introduction to is done, so you need to finish the Azure fundamental concepts, which also talks about the introduction to and different types of cloud models that will be there, so which I was talking about. Again, if I go and click on this, again, they're going to be an introduction to you, your prerequisites, and this will talk about the type of cloud modules. What is public cloud, what is private cloud, and what is hybrid cloud. These are very important for you to understand the concepts. You're going to read this, and then you're going to each of the topics and finish off everything and do a knowledge check again. You're going to see the benefits of considerations, different cloud services that are available, and you should know how this illustration is also being there. And you should know what is infrastructure as a service, what is served as product as service, and what is called as software as a service. And these are very important learning cycles for you to go through. Okay, and I'll just go back, and here also you're going to have the knowledge check. So everything that you read, you should have a knowledge. You should go through your knowledge check option and see the time that you'll have. It is 24 minutes that it will take for you to finish it. And this particular one is total is 4 minutes left because I finished a couple of them, but you should see the overall time that it takes to finish the reading these things. You need to read, you need to go and do a knowledge check. And Azure core architectural components, and as I was talking about, this is also a 34 minutes of reading where you should know about Azure subscriptions, different kinds of management groups and resource groups that are available. You're going to talk about the regions, availability regions and region pairs. And again, knowledge check. There's also exercise here. Create a website hosted in Azure. So let's go click on this and see what is there. I'm just taking you through anyways. The instructor is going to anyways explain you more in detail about it. And there is also a sandbox here, but you already have an environment, so you should not worry about it. Exercise, create a website hosted in Azure. So you're going to go through this. You're going to go through the app service. You should see what resources are required, and then you're going to create a WordPress website, which is easily being developed, and then that is required for you basically to understand the concepts and to understand the processes, so that you know any question comes into this group, you're going to just answer it then. So that's why you need to go through this reading, and also the instructor will help you out getting through the different levels of concepts on this also. So it is very important that you go cover all the modules. all the modules. Core services, when you go, it is 2 hours 40 minutes. Go read, finish everything about the core services, which is very important, which is for you to understand what it is, and networking services, and then storage services, database, and analytical services. So you should know all this and very important concepts that you have to go through. I'm also bringing you, you don't need this link actually because you're going to have the direct path link, which I already shared it to you all. You need to finish all these 6 modules with the knowledge check and the instructions provided by the instructors. You will guarantee certify in this particular exam. And there is another site that is also important, which I'm going to share it to you people, which has been written by one of the experts or someone called Mark. Okay, Mark is an expert and to Microsoft Fundamentals course and study guide. This I'm giving it only for one reason to you all students. Uh, this is basically for you to help yourself be very comfortable. As I explained about topic by topic, for every episode there is a video that is there. This is an extra thing that I'm providing to you other than instructional training. Mark is an expert, so if you go to this content as well, the content that is there on a platform on the Microsoft, you will get certified. So for every module, you also see the weightage is given, right? You will see that there is a link that is being given. There is also a study cheat sheet is also there. This is a shortcut for you also to achieve and get succeeded. But you do not have to go through it. If you're going through the curriculum, cheat sheet is will helpful only at certain times, not all the times. And then there's a practice test. For every topic, there's a practice test in this particular site. And there is nothing you're going to do these next 3 days. It is only about studying about this. Students, after the class, you just have to go. You have to go and study. That's it. There's nothing else that you're going to do. There's nothing else that I also expect you to do it. So this also I'm sending you this links also because he is an expert. His content is very good. He has drafted it topic wise for you so that you'll have multiple study cases and practices for you to go through so that it becomes easy for you to achieve it. Okay, that's why I'm sharing you this multiple references so that you go and students do not think that so many topics are there, it will take so much of time. As I already mentioned, all these topics you can finish each of the topics in 2 hours, and within 2 hours if you read it, you'll become very good at it. Okay, so I'm sharing you this link also in the group. Kindly share it to all of your friends also. Exam date will be 30th of September, and you are only going to book those dates. I'm going to send you the certification vouchers by tomorrow morning to all of you, and you have to go and book the dates. Please use this particular link which I'm sharing it here. This particular link is very important link. markzack.io AZ900. This particular link is a very good link for AZ900, which will actually help you to clear the examination very easily along with the documents, Microsoft documents that you are seeing there. Okay, please read, go through these documents also. Along with the instructor, you need to listen to the instructor as well, and also the content that is there. So I've shared you the link for the docs. You all have registered. You registered in Azure portal, and I've sent you Mark Zack's link also. Now we'll take a short break of 5 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll see what to do and how to proceed on these things. And then we'll start with some smaller topics now, and then we'll start learning about it. Okay. So quick 5 minutes break, uh, and then we'll be back. It's 10:38, which is like 10. So let's all be back by 10:45. Okay, let's all be back by 10:45, and then we're going to see what we're going to talk about. 10:45. Let's be back. And just keep on mute. I'm not going away from the chat. So 10:45. Let's be back. And please bookmark all these links. Do not forget, keep bookmark all these links. These are all very important. Please bookmark your links. And also students, go to the Byte Excel channel at YouTube also there. Students who are not able to view here, join here. Please join the YouTube channel and subscribe to Byte Excel channel. Yeah, students. So I've sent you the Byte Excel YouTube channel. You can actually all subscribe to this channel. We're going to give a lot of sessions, live sessions in the channel, which going to benefit you in terms of data success, algorithms, product-based companies trainings, very, very good problems, resolving the code chef problems, hacker rank problems. Everything will be with taught in YouTube channel of Byte Excel. Kindly go and subscribe to it so that it will help you whenever there's an alert to you. Kindly go and look into those particular advanced sessions and also sessions on AWS certifications, Azure certification, like, and you will be provided with lots of free voucher certifications. Everything you'll get notifications whenever there is any free notification vouchers that we are providing. So you get a notification and you can actually take up that vouchers. So kindly subscribe so that it will help you so much after subscribing, and it will give you all information when you subscribe definitely about the classes, regular and advanced data success algorithm trainings, advanced aptitude training. We also do a couple of CAT trainings on terms of there, and a couple of times we do the gate training sessions that you will be able to see on the classes in the YouTube coming up. So that all will be helping you. You can just go and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. So I'll quickly take like 3-4 minutes break and I'll be back. So done with your break, everyone. Back. Please ping me. So everyone are back. Ready? Someone was asking for the mark link again. Okay. And I shared the link again. Okay, let me share my screen. Perfect. So I hold on. I think I should share my. Perfect. So students, if you can hear my, I hope you can see my screen. And also, so now let's talk a little about what exactly this cloud, all this is coming about. Okay. I hope everyone can see my screen. Can you all listen to me? Okay. Again, looks like my internet has dropped a little. Yes, just give me a second. Just trying to fix it again. Done. Okay. Okay. So little about cloud. So your meaning, did can any one of you answer me and tell what is cloud? I'm going to explain you more in detail, but can anyone can someone explain what is cloud? So I just wanted to see what you would say for cloud. Can anyone explain what is cloud? Can anyone type in a chat saying, can anyone respond back?
I think Charan, students are testing in the chat box, like virtual environment and everything. Students, try to please inform your friends to join back. Like when the break is over and we're starting the class, I can see a drop off, like 3 people are dropping off. Please do inform your friends to join back. Sorry for the glitch, students. Like just like a couple of minutes. Yeah, he's there. He's back.
Sorry, students, I'm back. Actually, there was an issue with my account, so I had to log in again back with a different account. But anyways, let me quickly share my screen and let's talk. What I'm asking is before getting onto this, the cloud, the question is, what is cloud? Can anyone answer it? Before I go and explain about the cloud in detail, can anyone answer back saying what is cloud? You can ping me in the chat. The delivery of computing services over the internet, good. Virtual storage, what else? Virtual space access anymore? Okay. We can use cloud to store and retrieve data. Okay. Cloud computing services delivered through internet is cloud. Okay. Good. Someone sent me a link for reference. Huh? Storing data without direct management of user, application-based software infrastructure. Okay, so let me explain now a little detail about how this cloud everything have come in. Okay, let's talk a little about that. So the agenda basically that I'm going to talk is what is cloud in Azure, why is it important? Okay, uh, so when I'm talking about what is cloud computing, right? So generally, as you all said, it all combined, that well explained by each one of you. So cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of an IT resources via the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. So we'll talk about what was before cloud computing. So before cloud computing, right? Companies used to buy their own servers to install and manage inside their buildings, right? That is what used to happen. So there's an IT company before cloud computing exists, or cloud computing has been introduced. Companies used to buy a huge size servers and they install and manage everything within their own premises. This is something we call as on-premises storage. So before cloud storage, you can also have on-prem and you can have cloud. So on-prem storage is all that. Someone having a physical server, installing and managing inside their respective buildings is what is on-prem storage, which was there before cloud computing. Now we'll also talk about this on-prem. Okay, on-premises storage has many downsides, you can call as like basically about in terms of the cost, it is high upfront cost. You need to invest lots of money to have an on-prem setup. Basically, because you're going to have a lot of accessibility places, you're going to have high risk of losing the data, high risk of server lose the power. All these things can happen. It because of being an on-prem, because of the different kinds of natural calamities or risk around that we see it. But in generally, you go and look at it, it is not just only the cloud computing, cloud, basically the cloud platform. There are companies who still uses on-premises storage. There are still people who are there. But trust me, students, it's going to hurt them so much because there's a huge loss if something happens. So they should be very careful to avoid that particular kind of situations and to see that uh, risk and everything is mitigated. The cloud computing has something which has come into existence. If you call about the aura of cloud computing, right? You can simply, as I said, it's an on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet with pay-as-you-go servicing. For example, as I was talking about Microsoft Azure, or you go to the Google Cloud Platform, or you go to the AWS, when you use their service as a platform, you actually pay them for whatever that you use. You don't use their services, you bring it down, they don't charge you. You use their service, you're going to get charged. That is something what happens generally with cloud platforms. And also you can say it's a system which allows access to services like storage or development platforms, adding on-demand delivery, which is connected via internet, via the offsite data centers is also a good term to use to mention and to talk about the cloud computing. Some of the few partners who are, before going to this, who are very strong in the market. If you look at this, Amazon AWS is the first major cloud computing service provider released in the year of 2006. And it currently has half an cloud services market share overall the market. So out of 100%, 50% is being occupied by AWS in general, and then you can say 25% would go to Microsoft Azure, and then you have 10% of the area. You see that GCP is there. There's a couple of Google migrations, Amazon migrations are going to GCP, and then you have others. Others are like Alibaba and all those things come under that category of cloud platforms. So AWS is a major player, and Azure, Microsoft is coming under second. Third would be GCP, and fourth would be the player like the other players who are there in the market like Alibaba. Now, when you start looking at it, right, uh, AWS and the Azure and GCP also has started pulling up the markets, respectively, trying to give more services and components as existing to AWS. But still, if you look at the current market, AWS has the highest services and components being built as of today. That's the one thing that you have to remember. Now, as a couple of students have said, storage, right? They're saying it is a storage. But where is actually is cloud storage? Cloud storage actually sounds like it is just a floating somewhere, right? So because people would think, okay, it's a cloud. People think it is floating somewhere, but no, it is really very similar to like your traditional servers that are there, hardware storage. Even the cloud storage is also the same. But saying on top of that, cloud sends it to be stored in a local data center operated by the partners like Google, Amazon, and Azure. So remember, so there is no difference between the storage, what you would generally do with the traditional approach that used to be followed before the cloud is there. Like you have an on-prem physical server. Now, this majorly is something which is being maintained by these partners, cloud platform partners like Google, AWS, and Azure, and they see that this data stored as cloud, and that's how it came. It doesn't mean that it is somewhere stored in the air. It is not air. It is also a kind of servers, a hardware storage, which actually helps you that. And there are also similar things that each one of us also have to understand is when you go to go to the cloud storage providers, there's hundreds of data centers across the planet that are there right now. The reason why they do that is they see that they ensure that you get the access rightly and work from anywhere. That's why there's about the regions and availability zones. They're going to be you're going to have the servers at US, you're going to have servers in India, you're going to have the availability zones in India. So now, if you look at AWS also, right, when you talk about the different zones, and you go to Azure, there are different zones that are available. We're going to talk about the zones, of course, in the detail. So that the reason why they're going with too much of zones is also about giving them the high availability and access to the systems with a much easier way. Now we'll also talk about few things before getting to the private cloud, public cloud, and hybrid. We'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of cloud computing. Okay, because it's very important that we have to know it. So let's take we are solving a certain problem, let's say of an on-premises based systems where cloud computing has its own share of disadvantages as well. So we're going to do a comparison and let's break down certain advantages of it and also disadvantages of it. When you go to the advantages of the cloud computing, it's very important that you have to see the access to the technology, first of all, which is nothing but democratizing the way you provide access to the technology. So when you look at companies, both at small and large, okay, you need to do this comparison, right? When companies both at small and large can access the similar high-tech services. So because there is no differentiation between a smaller startup and a bigger startup because of the cloud coming up, that's an advantage that cloud computing brings in. And the other thing that also advantage you have with cloud computing is by switching from high upfront hardware to dynamically priced and well-established data centers is something being has come up. So the cost that you involve at upfront paying up so much of cost using the on-premises have reduced down when you go to the cloud computing, and that's one of the advantages that you have. And the other advantages is easy maintenance and about the versatility. Easier maintenance in terms of how you easily maintain your centralized data using the data centers where distributed company-wide on the data that is there on cloud. I think just give me 1 second.
Charan?
Chaitanya?
I think Sukesh is here in the call. I think he can able to transfer.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
Hey, Charan, good morning.
Hey, Sukesh, good morning. Students, so Sukesh is one of the experts training on AWS Microsoft certifications. I think he would take over. I have a couple of other meetings which I'll jump in with. Thank you, Sukesh, for joining.
No problem,
and taking over the class. And I just started introducing them to the cloud computing. What I have done, I'll let you just give you a brief. So I have given, I'm just sharing my screen. You should be able to see my screen. Okay.
Yes.
I give them the background of the syllabus that is going to get covered. Okay. I've seen that they get an access to this docs and they are all signed in. So that they can go through these sessions as well after your sessions are done. And okay. I've got them their accounts created in Azure platform.
Okay.
But subscription is still not done, so that has to be taken care. Okay. And I have introduced. I've told them the MarksAct site, the RMAX site, so that it is helpful for them to clear the certification. And started introducing about the cloud computing, and then you are in, so you can take over from here. Okay.
Sure, I'll do that. Thank you so much, John.
Yes. Students, so be very focused and all the best to you all. Sukesh is one of the best trainers in the market, and he is from industry. He was working for Mercedes-Benz and IBM. and he supports ByteExcel in all the certification trainings. And I haven't introduced about myself, so I'm Sri Charan. I'm also very senior technical trainer. I'm from industry, uh, and I'm also one of the co-founders and COO of ByteExcel. So Sukesh, you can take over and then rock it, man, so that they all
Sure.
get certified. Okay.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
Charan, for
Thank you
your
so much.
kind words, and
Yeah.
always
Take care.
happy to share the knowledge.
Superb. Thank you. Take over.
Okay, so hope all of you are geared up for the certification program. So how many of you are excited? So how many of you are so desperate to get the certification done? So we have 880 participants. That is a huge number. And yes, I want to see that energy and the confidence for next 3 hours until you complete the certification and get your dream job. Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much for confirming, and let's have a great interaction.
Hands raised for you.
Sorry, Charan? Charan, did you say anything? No. Perfect. So let me start sharing my screen, and please do confirm if you can see it. Just a moment. Before that, I just want to make a small changes for here. Just a moment, guys. Give me just 10 seconds. Perfect. Let me share my screen now. How many of you can see my screen? Great. Thank you for confirming. And now let's talk about cloud computing before we get into Azure. So what is your understanding on cloud computing? And okay, while explaining about cloud computing, Charan was speaking about how these cloud services are being accessed and how it made your life easy, irrespective of the organization size. It can be a startup, it can be a MNCs, or it can be any of the tech giants which is available in the industry now, right? So now, what is your understanding on cloud computing? Any answers? You can use a chart section. So we're not expecting a standard definition of cloud computing. However, you can see this slide and you can answer from that also. I don't mind. But personally, what do you think about cloud computing and why it is important? Okay, pay only for which you use. That's absolutely right. Delivering a computing service over the internet. That's perfect. No more need of data centers and so on. Thank you so much. All the answers are perfectly correct. Now let's see this definition, what exactly this says. It says cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing. Now let's try to break down this definition into multiple parts. What it says is IT resources. What do you mean by IT resources? Any guesses? When I say IT resources, what exactly it is? Computers. Perfect, you're right. Any other answers? Servers and databases. Perfect. Access and retrievals. Perfect. Softwares and all this stuff. Perfect. You guys are already a master into it. Okay, that's great. So good to know that understanding. Now, when I say IT resources, it can be a server, it can be a storage, it can be a network, it can be a database, or it can be any other services or resources provided through internet, right? That is why it has why the internet. And the most important thing to like keep in mind here is with pay as you go pricing. When I say pay as you go pricing, it means that you do not have to do the upfront investment. Whenever you want to start a IT company, then of course you want to do some research, or you want to host your application, or you want to provide some servers to the developers. But in this case, okay, when it comes to that, you may have to do the huge upfront investment in order to procure those resources. But when it comes to the cloud, you just sit down and relax. You just go ahead to Azure or any other cloud service provider. You get the server from them for rent basis and use it as much as possible. And once you are done with your work, once you feel that these servers or these resources doesn't require anymore, you just give it back to them and pay for whatever you have used. That is where the consumption based services will come into the picture. Is it clear? Perfect. So let's move on to the great. Good to see the active participation though. Okay, now let's talk about cloud deployment model, right? So have you ever heard about this cloud deployment model before? How many of you have heard about these things? Okay, perfect. I can see many students or many participants are raising their hand. Okay, I assume that many of you have come across this cloud deployment model. Okay, now let me tell you what exactly it is. The first one is the private cloud. What do you mean by private in general? What do you mean by private? When I say private, which is nothing but which would be available for single cloud customer, or which is private to one person, or it is private to any organization, right? Now let's take an example of Bytexcel itself. Now when I say the Bytexcel is using a private cloud, which means that all the resources or all the data center belongs to Bytexcel, right? So that is where the private cloud comes into the picture. Now what happens is, when it comes to the deployment model, the way these services are deployed, or where these services are managed, or where these resources are managed is totally depends on this cloud deployment model. Now take an example. When it comes to the cloud, everything is virtualized when it comes to the cloud. Now, how many of you know about hypervisor? Now, what is the purpose of having the hypervisor? Let me use MS Paint quickly if you want to for better understanding of these clouds. I'm very bad at drawing, but still. Just a moment, seems like there is an issue with my mouse. Perfect. Now let's assume that you have a physical server. Now let me share my screen. Yeah, I think it must be visible now. Now, if we have something called as a physical server. Now, if you take an example of your laptop, which is something physical, right, which is owned by you or any of your family member. Now, so all the resources, especially a CPU, memory, hard disk, which would be belonging to the single laptop, right? There is no virtualization at all. Now we have a physical server with, let's say, some good amount of configuration, just like 16 GB of RAM, okay, and 8-core CPU, and some 5 TB of storage. Now, if you are going with the laptop or the server with this configuration, you may use it or you may not use it, or you may fully utilize these resources, or you may not would be able to fully utilize these resources. That totally depends on your application. That totally depends on your purpose. Now, that is where the virtualization comes into the picture. When it comes to the cloud, it is nothing but a virtualization. When it comes to the server in the cloud, which is nothing but a virtual server in the cloud. And what happens is, on top of that, there is something called as, in order to virtualize this, or in order to manage these resources in an optimal way, there is something called as a hypervisor came into the picture. Okay. Now, what this hypervisor does, that will virtualize the underlying hardware resources. Now you have a physical server. On top of that, I have a hypervisor now. Now the advantage or the beauty of this is, I can have multiple virtual machine, or you can also call, when it come to the cloud, we call it as a virtual machine, or you can also call it as a server on top of this hypervisor. Now I can call this as virtual machine 1. I can call this as virtual machine 2. I can call this as virtual machine 3. And I can call this as virtual machine. Can have n number of virtual machine though. That totally depends on underlying hardware resources. However, the one more important advantage associated with virtualization is, you can have a virtual machine of different operating system. You can have a Windows over here. You can have a Linux over here. Okay. You can have Mac over here. And again, when it comes to the Linux, you can have Ubuntu over here. Okay. So how many of you know about different flavors of Linux? Perfect. So Surya Teja says hypervisor help us to use VMs, or help us to create VMs. Now on a bare metal machine using hypervisor, we can create and use many VMs. Yes, you're perfectly right. When it comes to the different flavors of Linux, when it comes to the Linux is a open source, right? And there's different flavors associated with that. Amazon Linux, there's something called as a Ubuntu, there's something called as SUSE, there's something called as a Debian, Fedora, and so many things associated with that. Now, if you're really interested, you can also get the source code as a developer, and you can have your own flavor of Linux operating system. Just try it out whenever you get time. It requires a good amount of time, or quality amount of time to be spent on that in order to come up with the new flavors. It's not an easy task though, right? So this is where the virtualization comes into the picture, and this is how the servers are virtualized within the data center of cloud service provider. Now what happens is, when I say private cloud, so all these resources, right, would belongs to the same cloud customer. Now, as a byte Excel, if I'm going to the Azure saying that I'm in a need of a private cloud, so all this data center would be assigned to byte Excel, so that no one would be able to use it. That is the one important thing you have to keep in mind. The second thing, that is where the private cloud comes into the picture. The second one is the public cloud. So what is your guess on public cloud? Just guess it and let me know. And I would be expecting some answers in the chat window. Okay, I can see many answers here. Let me see that. Yes, of course, these are the cloud service provider, but how different it is. Like if you can relate with the diagram which I have drawn, then how different it is. The answers, okay, I could see many answers. Let me read it out. Available to all people or organization like Azure and AWS, okay. all the users can access. Perfect. Which we are using for free of cost. Even for purchase. Okay. You could see many answers. Really appreciate those answers. Now, when it comes to the public cloud, if you can look at this diagram now, if the whole infrastructure is belongs to the single cloud customer, that would become a public cloud. Now, as a cloud customer, now one of the student from, let's say, let me take out few names with the chat section. Okay, we have Kavyashree who goes to Azure. She has an Azure account and she gonna launch one virtual machine in cloud. Whenever she gonna launch one virtual machine, she requests for Windows virtual machine. Okay, when it comes to the Windows virtual machine, what happens is now this particular machine, that is VM1, would be allocated to Kavyashree now. Okay, now the second person, let's assume that Chandrasekhar, right? Okay, Chandrasekhar and Rishav Kumar also goes to Azure dashboard, and even they are looking for one of the virtual machine in Linux, and the other person is looking for the Mac OS. Okay. Chandra and Rishav, and we have one more cloud customer. Let's say Surya here. Okay, who is looking for a specific flavor of Linux operating system. Now, what happens over here is now we have a different cloud customer who is belonging to the different organization. They can be an individual also, and they can represent any other organization also, using a different virtual machine which is hosted on a same physical server. So that is where they are sharing the underlying resources, right? So that is why we'll call it as a public cloud. So for the customer, yes, it is logically isolated. However, your servers would be running on a same physical server or a same physical machine, which would be shared by multiple cloud customer. So that's a one thing you have to keep in mind. That is where the public cloud comes into the picture. That is where the public cloud is cheaper compared to the private cloud. Like that is the major reason associated with public cloud. Is it clear? Any questions now? Did you guys understand the concept? Did you guys understand private as well as a public cloud? Perfect. So when it comes to the hypervisor, one of the participant has requested to explain about the hypervisor. Now you have a physical server or a hardware resources now which has 16 GB of RAM, in our case 8-core CPU and some 5 TB storage. Now if you are going to like install a host operating system on top of it, and of course you would be running one of your application, your application may or may not fully utilize the resources available, right? Now, in order to optimize the resource utilization or in order to better utilize these resources, that is where hypervisor came into the picture. We can have a single physical server. On top of that, this hypervisor will come into the picture. We normally use type 1 hypervisor when it comes to the data center. And using this hypervisor, you would be able to divide this hardware resources into a multiple part or a chunks, and you can have your different virtual machine of different operating system, and we call it as a guest operating system. Take an example of your laptop. Now let's assume that you have Windows operating system which is running in your machine. Now once you're running a Windows operating system, what happens is for any other purpose, if you require Linux operating system, so what would be an available option to you? So how do you solve the problem? The question to you guys is, you guys have, let's assume that if you are using Windows operating system and there is a need to use a Linux operating system because of the project work. Now, you do not have a money to procure it, but however, is there any way to do it? Have you ever came across any such technology over there? Yes, that is where virtualization comes into the picture. And I'm sure that you might have heard about Oracle VirtualBox. All you have to do is you have to install Oracle VirtualBox on your machine. And that Oracle VirtualBox would help you to virtualize the resources. You can install Linux operating system or any other operating system on top of that. And we call it as a guest operating system or virtual machine. Is it clear? Yes, you can use your cloud service provider as well. I was just relating to the Oracle VirtualBox on your local machine as well as the cloud. Okay, great. So now let me go back to the presentation. Let me start presenting now. Okay, now there is something called as a hybrid cloud. Now, what is your understanding on a hybrid cloud now? We have discussed about private as well as a public cloud, but when it comes to the hybrid, what exactly it is? Yes, mixture of public as well as a private cloud. So what happens is most of the organization, take an example of like banking customer or a banking organization. They always tend to have their workload or application in private cloud. Now, private cloud is costlier in nature. Now, what happens is now if they all the sensitive data would be stored in a private cloud or the application which generates a sensitive data would be on a private cloud. Now let's assume that they wants to do some analytics and they wants to make an use of a public cloud. Then they can have their part of data in a public. They can utilize this cloud service provider and they can get it done from public cloud. So that is where the combination as an organization, you are using a private cloud for non-sensitive works, or let's say if the service offered in the public cloud is cheaper, if it meets your compliance as well as regulation, then you can go ahead and use a public cloud. So if the same, since the same organization is utilizing like a different deployment models, that is where we call it as a hybrid cloud. So that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Is it clear? So the next one is there's something called as multi-cloud. So what is your thoughts on multi-cloud? Have you ever came across it? Okay, let me see the chart section to reduce the cost on services. Yes, perfect. You are perfectly right. Now, let's assume that you are using AWS for any reason. Now, there are services, it totally depends on the cost, or if you are already using a Microsoft product, and if you are using some of the products in AWS, now the organization tends to use the product which is native to the cloud service provider, just like Microsoft SQL, right? So in such scenarios, or as an architect, you would be deciding like which service would be better and which one would be better for the organization, and which has more flexibility and which has more security, and most importantly, the cost associated with that. So that is where multi-cloud comes into the picture. Now, as Bytexel as an organization can go with the AWS as well as Azure for some of their services, right? So they can share the workload between these cloud provider. That is where the multi-cloud comes into the picture. So this is called as a cloud deployment model. So is it clear? Any questions? Now let's look at the difference between on-premises as well as cloud. Now, I would expect you guys to tell me, so what is the difference between on-premise and cloud? Okay, when it comes to the hybrid cloud, it's a combination of private and a public. Now, as an organization, if you have some regulation and compliance to meet, and if you have if you are dealing with the sensitive user-related information, then you normally keep your workload on your private cloud. However, for any advertisement or for any services like analytics, or if you want to store some non-sensitive data in the cloud, in the public cloud domain, you can make use of these public cloud platforms, and you can store it over there. So if you are using those, both the deployment model at the once, right? So that is where the hybrid cloud will come into the picture. So that's, or let's assume that for any POCs or research, if you want your developer to use the virtual machine which is available or which is being shared across a different customers or in a public cloud, so then of course you are using your development environment in the public cloud. When it comes to the production workload, you would be using it is in a private cloud. That is much safer, right? So you do not have to worry about the data, because normally the development environment doesn't deal with much of sensitive information. That's the one thing you have to keep in mind. Hope it helps. So now let's talk about difference between on-premise as well as a cloud. So now, as you can see here in the table, when it comes to the on-premise, what is on-premise, guys? Have you ever heard of on-premise, something called as on-premise? Okay, it is having all data center in the company. Okay, that's a physical data center which is being managed by the, let's assume when it comes to the byte Excel, when I say my application and everything is on-premise, it means that I'm running my workload in a physical data center which is owned by me, right? Whenever I own something which comes with the overhead, the burden of administration, that's a one thing you should be ready to manage. Take an example of your laptop again, or take an example like you are buying a brand new car today, right? This evening, and once after that, who is responsible for managing? If something goes wrong, you are responsible for that. You have to take your car for the service like every 3 months or a 6 month, and you have to look after it very well, right? So that's the most important thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to the on-premise. When it comes to the data center, which comprises of various components, just like your network, the storage, the physical server, the hypervisors, the application, data, runtime, all those things, right? Network switches and everything comprises of the data center, and you would require a skilled resources in order to manage all these resources. So that's the most important thing you have to keep in mind. And as you can see here, so what happens is when it comes to the on-premise, the scalability becomes a challenge, right? But in order to solve these problems, the cloud will come into the picture. It says everything is managed by the cloud service provider. There is an abstraction between a cloud service provider as well as a cloud customer. So that's the one thing we are going to discuss in the further section. Maintained by the cloud service provider. So as I said before, now if they are giving you a server for rent, it means that the underlying infrastructure is managed by them. So you do not have to worry about the uptime of the server. You do not have to worry about the hardware configuration. So you do not have to worry about the upgradation or any sort of the patching which is done from the Microsoft end. Now resources are assigned as per the requirement by the provider. It is not like you just go to any of the you just build one physical data server without a proper planning over here. It's just like whenever you need, you go ahead, you use it. Once you're done with your job, you just give it back to the cloud. Okay, so that's the most important thing comes into the picture. Now we can only pay for what we use. This is the most important thing you have to keep in mind. You'd be paying for whatever you are using. Unlike on-premise environment, whether you use it or doesn't matter. Once you buy it, you are liable to it, right? That is the most important thing. That's see, when it comes to the on-premise, it's a liability comes along with that. When it comes to the cloud, there's no strings attached, so there's no liability at all. That's the one thing. It's the most important thing. That is one of the flexibility comes with the cloud service provider. So did you understand so far? Perfect. That's great. Thanks for confirming. Now, this is the architecture of hybrid cloud. As you can see, an organization using both private as well as a public cloud in order to meet the like organization demand or the requirement. Now let's talk about cloud delivery model. We have talked about deployment model. There are two key terminologies. The first one is the deployment model, or the way these services are being organized, okay, or way the resources are being organized in order to give it to the user. And there's something called as cloud delivery model. Now, how many of you heard about this terminology called IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS? How many of you have heard about it, or have you ever came across these things before? If yes, let me know your answer in the chat section. If yes, let me know your answer from in the chat section. I think Surya is from KLU, right? Or all of you are from KLU? Okay, perfect. So now I would expect your answer for this. If you are like, if you are aware of this infrastructure as a service or IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, let me know your understanding about these things in the chat section. And based on that, I'd be like giving more explanation to it. Okay, someone has given an interesting answer over here. Who's that? Surya. Infrastructure as a service, providing all the ingredients to make a dish. Yes, of course. So you must have all the ingredients are there. Okay, platform as a service, PaaS, providing only the ready-made mix. So like a Maggie, right? Okay, perfect. So those are some of the interesting answer though, and really appreciate providing the dish itself. Okay, software as a service. I'll come to your analogy, Surya, and thanks for that. When it comes to the infrastructure as a service, as you can see in the diagram, there are four important things to keep in mind. This is how the data center looks like, and these are the major components which comprises of data center, right? And I would say these are the core components. If you look at the first column, which has on-premises, followed by infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. When it comes to the on-premise, now that is nothing but a traditional data center or a physical data center of ByteXL or any other. What happens over here, if you look at the bottom of the screen, we have it starts with the networking, followed by the storage. Why do we require networking? In order to interconnect, or it can be for reaching out to the internet, or it can be for talking to talking to internal services. So that is where the networking will come into the picture. The storage, in order to store your data, of course, you need a storage mechanism over there. There's something called as a servers, and on top of the physical servers, you have a virtualization layer. We talked about it. There's something called as an operating system comes into the picture, the guest operating system. Now middleware, runtime, data, and application. Now, if you want to host your application on your on-premise data center, so these are the core component which comes along, and you would be responsible for everything. If something goes wrong, you would be held responsible. And what you had to do is you may have to hire the administrator of relevant skills on these technologies, and they must be able to look after it. And when it comes to this operational task, which is always tedious, you never know what goes down and when exactly it goes down. So you have to keep guessing, or you have to make sure that your infrastructure is well designed or equipped to handle the failure. That's the most important thing associated with the on-premise. When it comes to the on-premise, everything is your responsibility. As Surya was talking about one of the analogy here, when it comes to here, if you want to like cook a food, and in such case, you need to have everything here, right from the vegetable, right from the like rice or everything, right from the physical equipments, everything is your responsibility. If you want to have a product, so everything, like all the bonus is on you. The second thing is the infrastructure as a service. It's the most important thing. That is the first one in a delivery model. As you can see here, there are two color combination here. The first four, the lower four, the networking, storage, servers, and virtualization is managed by the cloud service provider. This is, boss, you do not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. I would manage this for you. This is a favor from my end. Now, as part of this favor, you have to like, you may have to pay extra for that, right? So that is a level of management comes into the picture. Now, on top of that, operating system to the application is the responsibility of the consumer, the one who is going to use it. Just like it is a server provided, let's take an example of a virtual machine in Azure. So they give it to you. Only the thing is, okay, whatever the application you want to install, you install it, you configure the dependencies and libraries that is required for the application, and you just go ahead with that. So that's it. So you don't worry about the underlying infrastructure resources at all. It is just like, okay, you don't worry about the equipments or the whatever required to cook. So only the thing is you should know the recipe, and you should know like what exactly which is required to prepare it. Like if you want to prepare a pulao, now you should know what it takes to prepare a pulao, right? You need vegetables, you need oil, and all the stuff. So when it comes to the platform as a service, now this is purely designed for the developers, where developers are least bothered about configuring the environment for their application, right? So I don't want to take the burden of configuring this. All I want to do is I want to develop my application, right? So as a student, like I want to develop an application which is going to earn $1 million in the future. So that I don't want to worry about the things which is not required for me. All I want to have is a platform where I can test my application and deploy it. That is where a platform as a service comes into the picture. It would be very beneficial, especially if you want to be a developer or if you are a developer. There's something called as a software as a service. Now, as you can see here, nothing is owned by you. Only the thing is you would be consuming it. Let's take an example. Software as a service. Any examples? Okay, Dropbox, Gmail, Office 365. Perfect. That's correct. When it comes to the software as a service, you're just consuming it. Take an example of Zoom. We are using Zoom for this online training delivery, right? So when it comes to this, that is where software as a service comes into the picture. Have you written a code? Absolutely no. Have you configured the environment in order to deploy the application? Absolutely no. Now, are you managing the server? Do you know where exactly it is like being managed? You do not know anything about it. Only the thing is we are just consuming the service as a software, right? So that's the most important thing you have to keep in mind. And when it comes to the platforms as a service, and we have a different services available, and there's something called as Azure App Service in Azure. Infrastructure as a service, we have a virtual machines in Azure. And the major thing is the most important thing to keep in mind here is the cost is the one aspect. The second thing is level of controllability and manageability. When it comes to the software as a service, there is no manageability and controllability. You just have to like create a meeting link and send it to the user. That's it. And the cost, of course, it would be higher, like considering the benefit which offers. And platform as a service, the cost would be lesser than a software as a service, and you would be having controllability and manageability on application, because you are the one who is going to design and develop an application. Infrastructure as a service, you would be having more control, that is why lesser cost compared to rest of the two. And as you can see here, you have an operating system, middleware, runtime, data, and application, which is managed by you. So any questions so far? Any question? Please let me know. Give me just 10 seconds. Okay, give me just one moment, guys. Okay, did you guys understand the concept? That is the most important thing. Any questions so far? Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to answer. Okay, any questions so far? I believe. Okay, perfect. That's great. Let's move on to the next topic. Now, who uses this like infrastructure as a service in order to host it? Now, what do we use this platform as a service in order to build the application? And what do we use software as a service in order to consume it? Okay, that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to the use cases, now again, the administrators, the architects do use it if they want to have more control over their application and the code. Now, the providers are Amazon, Azure, as well as a Google. When it comes to the platform as a service, it's purely designed by keeping in mind of developers. Okay, so that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. So there's something called as Google App Engine and OpenShift. Now, when it comes to the software as a service, which is purely used by the end users, and as you can see here, the Zoom, the Google Workspace, and the WebEx are the one. Okay. Now, these are some of the cloud service providers: the Microsoft Azure, the Google Cloud, and Amazon Web Services. So how many of you aware of Microsoft Azure? I think I'm damn sure that you guys are very much aware of Microsoft Azure now, since you are going to do the certification, right? So that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Okay, let's see some of the advantages and benefits associated with the cloud computing. Now, who wants to give an answer on this? So you can take any point over here and you can share your views. Who wants to do that? Okay, Surya says capex for variable expenditure will not invest huge amount at start, rather will pay for what we use. That's great, Surya. Surya, I really appreciate the level of understanding you have. So when it comes to the trade capital expenses for variable expense, which is nothing but instead of investing a huge amount on your procuring your hardware resources, you just forget that and you just focus on your variable expenses. That is where capex and operational expenditure comes into the picture. So that is because like you would be renting the servers from the cloud service provider, and like you would be paying for them once after consuming it, right? Or once you're done with that. Okay, Rishav Kumar says, oh, okay, no need to see how much storage it's gonna take. Absolutely right. That is for stop guessing capacity. Now there's something called as no need to download anything use. Okay, that is right. Stop guessing capacity. Okay, that's great. So let me explain the stop guessing capacity, and let me give you an example. Now you are building one brand new e-commerce website. Whenever you build the new website or a new application, now you must be having a plan, right? In order to like what server it would require in order to uh, manage the request or in order to serve the user's request. Now in the first month, now you have anticipated now huge amount of traffic in the beginning itself, and in order to serve those traffic, now you might have decided to go with the servers with a huge amount of configuration. Now if your business is not doing well, or if you are anticipated, let's say 10,000 requests a day or 10,000 customer a day, and if you are receiving only let's say 1,000 requests per day, in that case there is a huge gap, right? So in order to manage this, so you just stop bothering about the capacity. Now provision this cloud services or a cloud service that is scalable or elastic in nature, and whenever you need it you would be able to scale up, and whenever you would not require those things you just scale down. That is where stop guessing capacity comes into the picture. Now, there's something called as benefits from massive economies of scale. Since most of the customers are moving towards the um, these cloud providers, and even it would be easy for the cloud providers to procure the hardware at the lower cost, and all the benefits would be passed on to the end user. That is where benefits from massive economies of scale comes into the picture. There's something called as increased speed and agility. It is like how quickly and easily you would be able to deploy the resources and how fast it is. That is where increased speed and agility comes into the picture. Now stop spending money on running and maintaining a data center. So as you know, the managing the data center or running it always a pain, correct? So that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. And go global in minutes. It means that if you want to have your servers in US, if you want to have the same servers in India, if you want to have your same servers and the data in Europe, it's all about the matter of time you would be able to do it. So that's the beauty of cloud. And that is why the cloud is so famous in the market now. And most of the business are moving towards it. And really appreciate the answers which are given in the chart, and it shows you a level of understanding as well as the interest. Really appreciate once again. Thank you for that. Go global in minutes means we can collab with others easily by sharing views and thoughts. Of course, that is one of the thing. Stop spending money. Yes. Stop guessing capacity. We need not to worry about the size of the servers and instances. Perfect. Those are the right answers. Thank you so much for that. And let's move on to the next one. Now let's look at the statistics associated with the cloud computing. Now, if you look at the worldwide cloud infrastructure service spend in the year 2021, especially in the Q1 of 2021, and you can see here, and the overall spend is somewhere around 41.8 billion US dollar. That is huge. And out of which, AWS is the one who is leading it. And there's something called as Microsoft Azure, followed by Google Cloud and others. Okay. So that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. And if you look at this, now that's a level of scope this cloud that's a level of opportunity the cloud computing has generated over the period of time, since it is offering like huge amount of flexibility to the end users as well as the business. Now it would be easy for the business to embrace these things, and there is a huge opportunity in the market for everyone. So once the business moves towards the move towards the cloud, of course, in order to manage the business, they would require skilled resources. So where do they get the skilled resources? And of course, through this, right? So since you are getting certified once after graduation, it would be easy for you to like get into the role and start doing it, right? So that's the most important thing to keep in mind. So any questions so far? No questions? All right. All okay. That's great. Do you guys want to take a break? Quick break? Or how is it? Or shall I continue? How's it? Do you guys want a break? A quick, oh, not 20 minutes break though. I can give you 5 minutes break. So let me check at what time the session started today. Okay, so you didn't get any break in between, right?
They had a break in the middle around 10-15 minutes, Sukesh.
Oh, is it? Okay, I wasn't knowing that. So what we can do is we can give a quick 5 minutes break, okay? And we can continue. The time is 12:11 now, and we would be back by 12:16, okay? Thank you so much. Okay, all right, I'm back. So let's start again. Let me start sharing the screen. Let me know if I can start. Please do confirm. It's 12:17 already. I think we are 1 minute late. Good to go. That's great. Thanks so much. So far we have discussed about the cloud computing, what exactly it is, the different delivery models, as well as the deployment models and the benefits and the advantages associated with the cloud computing, right? So that's the most important thing to keep in mind. So now you are going to take up Azure certification program, that is AZ900, AZ900, that is Microsoft Azure Fundamentals. And that is what we are going to study for a few more hours and a few more sessions. Now, we already talked about Azure Fundamentals Part 1. That is where describing the core Azure concept comes into the picture. So let me click on that. Let me see what exactly were there. Okay, so we, as you can see here, we have already completed this introduction to Azure fundamentals. Okay, you already know what the cloud computing is, what exactly the Azure services, the Azure account, the case study, and everything, I believe, right? Now, if not, let me take you through that. Okay, I think we have already discussed about it. Let me explain it. Now, why should I move to the cloud? This is the most important question, like whenever any cloud service provider approach any of the business, right? So the first and foremost question comes to your mind is, why should I move to the cloud? Okay. The cloud helps you move faster and innovate in a ways that were once nearly impossible. Take an example of scalability, take an example of innovation. So that is where the cloud will come into the picture. Okay. So teams deliver new features to their user at a record speed. Now, if you want to deliver the changes or a software products to your end user, that is nothing but a customer, on time, right? Compared to your competitor. So you would require those resources to be available at all the time. You would require scalability, availability, all the stuff. So that is where these features will come into the picture. And in order to achieve that, you would require a cloud service provider. Now, user expects an increasingly rich and immersive experience with their devices, with their software. Now, what happens is if you are going with the on-premise, your server may goes down at any time, or you may not be having the services which is available in the public cloud domain. So that is one of the advantage. So that is how you can become a customer oriented, or you can develop a product which is customer oriented, and you would be able to release it on time with the highest quality, and you would be able to incorporate the innovation, right? So that is the most important thing you have to keep in mind. So you can see at the end here, to your services and deliver innovative and novel user experience more quickly, the cloud providers on-demand access to a nearly limitless pool of raw compute, storage, and networking components. So let me give an example to you. Now you have your system. Let's say you're running a show here. Okay. Now whenever you are running a show, now you would be capturing all the moments over there, right? In order to store all those moments, whatever you have captured, you would require a storage space, right? Now, if you have a hard disk, let's say you have any other devices in order to store it, or you have a hard disk or a file TV. Now, after running a few shows, your hard disk is completely occupied, or which has no space left in it. Now, what would be the turnaround in such scenarios? How do you overcome such scenarios? Okay, so you may have to buy the hard drive, the new hard drive, again start migrating the existing one and start uploading it, which which is like a tedious process and which never ends. And in order to solve that problem when it comes to the cloud, it's like a limitless, like it says nearly limitless pool of resources, right? So you do not have to worry about the storage size. You can store it, like you can use it accordingly. Now which has a tools which is like available for compute, which is available for networking, which is available for analytics, and which is available for speech recognition and other cognitive services, and that will help you to make your application stand out from the crowd. So that's an advantage. Always this cloud service provider comes with the innovation in a such a way that which would be useful at the enterprise level as well as from customer point of view too. Now let's see what exactly the Azure is. Now what is Azure now? So far we have discussed about Azure, right? Now so far we have discussed about the cloud service provider. Now what is Azure now? An example of cloud service provider. Yes, of course. This is a cloud service provider, right? You can also call it as cloud computing platform. Now, Azure provides various solutions to meet your business needs. Let it be migrating from your existing on-premise to the cloud, or let it be to meet the futuristic requirement. Okay, and which also provides infrastructure as a service. They are pioneer in infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and they do provide computing resources in the form of virtual machines. You would be able to use it for website as well as a database hosting also. And they have a various services in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and IoT. Okay, and also when it comes to the Azure, the beauty of this is they have a cloud-based storage that is a unlimited storage. So you do not have to worry about scalability at all. So you can use it for storing also, you can use it for backing up the data also. So that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. And there's something called as they also provide uh, Azure App Service, that is part of a platform as a service, which we have discussed. They provide Azure Function, that is one of the serverless architecture, the event-driven architecture we call it as. There's something called as containerized application, that is where Azure Container Service comes into the picture and Azure Kubernetes Service comes into the picture. They also provide wide range of database services that makes it easy for the developers or an architects to decide to go with the according to their application need. They can go with the NoSQL, they can go with the SQL, they can go with the Microsoft SQL servers too. That's the most important thing. As you can see here, be ready for the future. So that's the most important thing. So how do you be ready for the future? Like by futuristically designing your application as well as the infrastructure support, which is supporting your application. Build on your own terms, build on your terms. You have choices with the commitments to open source and support for all languages and frameworks. So that is the most important thing. As I said before, there's something called as a platform as a service. That is where app service comes into the picture. So you can use a different frameworks, you can use a different runtime, you can use a different technology to build it. Operate hybrid seamlessly, like so you can use an on-premise as well as you can use a public cloud wherever which is required. And trust your cloud gets, so that's the most important thing, the security in the cloud. They have a different level of security. That's the one thing, backed up by the team of expert and proactive compliance trusted by enterprise governance and startups. Since it is being used by majority of the organization, they use this security best practice in terms of regulation, compliance, and all the stuff. Let it be enterprises, let it be governments and startups. So that is where the Azure will comes into the picture. Now, what I can do with the Azure portal? So there are more than 100 services which is available in Azure. You can make use of those resources and according to your requirement or according to your organization demand. That is the most important thing to keep in mind. Okay. Now, what else? As you can see here, one of the example here, what this says is Azure provides artificial intelligence as well as machine learning services that can naturally communicate with your users through vision, hearing, and speech. That is the most important thing. That's the level of automation they have done. It also provides storage solution that dynamically grow to accommodate massive amounts of data. Now, if you are using a big data, or if you are accepting, or if you have a mobile application, so that is where the huge amount of data start piling up, right? So how do you manage the data which dynamically grows over the period of time? So that is where you need to have the storage solution which is scalable in nature and which is limitless in nature. So that is where this will comes into the picture. Now there's something called as Azure portal. So what is Azure portal? So any guesses? It's very simple and straightforward though. These are the basics you need to know. So whenever you get time, you can like go through these videos or short videos. That is really good. That will help you to enhance your understanding. Okay, when I say the Azure portal, which is nothing but graphical user interface, which is used to, let's assume that, which is used to create the resources graphically. That is where Azure portal comes into the picture. You would be able to build, you would be able to manage and monitor and everything from a single place. That is where the Azure portal comes into the picture. Next is create custom dashboard for an organized view of resources. Now what happens is you can have your custom dashboard also. Like if you want to organize the related resources according to the application, according to the environment, you would be able to have it. Then you would be able to configure accessibility option for optimal experience. So that is the one thing, you would be able to configure the security primitives in order to optimize the experience, the accessibility. So who can access or who can view it and all the stuffs will come into the picture. So what are the things you would be able to do it? You can create virtual machines. You can create a subscription. You can create a resource group. You can create a database. You can create Azure Kubernetes service, and you can manage the cost and billing. You can stop the subscription. You can delete the subscription. You can delete the resource group. There's so many things you can do it. I think so. Whatever the governance and management comes into the picture, once you start using these resources, so whatever required for the governance and management of the resources which is available in Azure, you would be able to do it. Let it be creation of the virtual machine. Let it be creation of the subscription. Let it be creation of the resource group. Let it be like designing the highly available infrastructure. You would be able to do everything and everything over there. Okay. As you can see here, this is the console. So how many of you have logged into your Azure console or Azure account? Okay, I have received few response and as well as some of the students. Okay, logged in, perfect. Right. If you can see, once you log into your Azure console, you would be able to see this at the left hand side. If you click on the home button, you must be able to see this. Just navigate through this, you would be able to understand. There's something called as a marketplace. Okay. Once you click on the create a resources, the resource can be like fetched, or you would be able to select the wide range of resources from Azure Marketplace. Now it says, why do we require this Azure Marketplace? It helps you to connect user with Microsoft partners, any partners who is providing the softwares, independent software vendors, and startups. They are offering their solution and service. Now, as a student, now let's assume that you are starting a startup who is focusing on designing on specific solution. What you can do is you can develop that design and develop that solution, and you would be able to sell it on like Azure Marketplace. It is like a centralized place for all the vendors. They can sell their products, and as a user, as an end user, I would be able to use it according to my requirement. Okay, so that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. Now, Azure Marketplace customers can find and try purchases and provision application and services from hundreds of leading service providers. Okay, so that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. Just navigate around. So I just give you 1 minute and let me know. Okay, that is where the marketplace comes into the picture. And yes, of course, if you are like, if you want to provide a solution to the industry problems, come up with a solution and in the form of products, and you would be able to sell your product in marketplace, and all the enterprise customers will start using it. And what it says, Azure Marketplace, customers can find, try, purchase, and provision application and services from hundreds of leading service providers. All solution and services are certified to run on Azure. So all these things are certified by the Azure. That's one thing you have to keep in mind. Now take an example of operating system. When it comes to the operating system, there are different players in the market, right? So they has to sell their product over here. So that needs to be certified, then only they would be able to do it. So when it comes to the certification of these products, so it goes to that they are going to scrutinize these products or the solution, whatever you're going to offer. Now we can see the solution catalog spans several industry categories such as open source container platform, virtual machine images, database application, build and deployment softwares, developer tools, threat detection, and blockchain. Using Azure Marketplace, you can provision end-to-end solution quickly and reliably. As you can see here in the at the left-hand side of the navigation panel, there is a menu item which has a different thing. So which offers a different categories in the form of compute, networking, storage, web, mobile, containers. How many of you have heard about containers? It's one of the latest technology in the market. Okay, perfect. So that is where this will come into the picture. Now, okay, the containers. Sorry, I was talking about the containers. That is one of the latest technology in the market, which is being embraced by many organizations. Okay, we have database analytics, AI plus machine learning, Internet of Things, integration, security, identity. It has a wide variety of categories, and according to your need, you can use any of this, okay, while creating the resources. Now let's see the tool of Azure services. So as I said before, Azure offers different set of resources which falls under different category. Take an example of compute. What is compute, guys? What is your understanding on compute? To work on anything or any specific answers? What is compute? Why do you require compute? You tell me. Okay, VMs bare metal machine that helps you to do the computational work. Okay, any other answers? Okay, now, so when I say compute, which is nothing but CPU and memory, now whenever you are going to create a new, when it comes to the operating system, everything is processed. In order to process those processes, it would require computing capacity in the form of CPU and RAM, right? So that is where compute will come into the picture. The networking, in order to isolate your resources or in order to group the resources within the same network. So that is where networking comes into the picture. The storage, of course, you know why we would require storage. The mobile related applications for databases, web, Internet of Things, big data, AI, and DevOps. So how many of you know about DevOps? Okay, good. So if you get a time, please read about DevOps. Okay, when it comes to the compute, let's see what are the different like resources or the services available under compute category. As a virtual machine, which is nothing but server. Azure Virtual Machine Scale Set, which is normally designed for scalability. Azure Kubernetes Service, that is an orchestration engine for containers. There's something called as Azure Service Fabric for distributed system platforms. There's something called as Azure Batch, that is if you want to run the task in parallel without provisioning the servers or the VMs, that is where batch, we call it as the batch processing. Azure container instances, like instead of running your application on top of your AC virtual machines, if you want to run it on a container, you would be able to do it. There's something called as Azure Function, that is an event-driven serverless architecture or a serverless compute service where you do not have to worry about the underlying infrastructure as well as the configuration. All you have to do is write your application, a small code, you just deploy it, which is going to trigger based on the events. That's the one thing you have to keep in mind. And when it comes to the networking, the most important thing you have to keep in mind is Azure Virtual Network. We normally call it as a virtual data center in the cloud. In order to isolate the resources or in order to keep the related resources or the application within the same network, that is where Azure Virtual Network comes into the picture. Okay, so that is where the Azure Virtual Network comes into the picture. Like, let's say, the resources which are launched within the Azure Virtual Network would be able to communicate with each other without any issues over here. There's something called as Azure Load Balancer. Now, what is Load Balancer here? Any guesses? Any guesses on Azure load balancers? Okay, which diverts the traffic to the backend servers. Absolutely right. Now it is purely for distributing the incoming traffic. That is where load balancer plays an important role. And there's something called as Azure DNS. That is domain name system, we call it as. Normally, whenever you type, let's say bytexcel.com in the browser, do you know how exactly it fetches the information? That is where it goes to the DNS. It fetches the information about the server, which contains the details. And once it gets the details about the server, there is a HTTP handshake which happens in the background. And so that is where which once the HTTP handshake is done, it starts like sharing the information. There's something called as Azure Content Delivery Network, which is purely used for increasing the performance. That is one of the things you have to keep in mind. There's something called as Azure Firewall that is purely for security purpose. Now there is one more thing called as a storage that is the most important one, as well as most interesting one. There's something called as a storage. When it comes to the storage, we do have different categories over there. And the first one is a blob storage, which is normally used for storage service for very large object, such as video files and bitmap. Just like your Google Drive, if you want to store your data or the moment which you have captured, how do you do it? So that is where this one will come into the picture, right? So that is where you would be able to use a Azure Blob Storage, okay, for unstructured data, browser-based storage solution, which is offered by Azure, and nearly unlimited data, you would be able to use it. There's something called as Azure File Storage. Now, file shares that can be accessed and managed like a file server. It's just like a network-based file server. If you want to share the documents or anything, let's say, not documents though, it's just like a network-based storage solution where if you have a multiple application and multiple server wants to talk to the same data points, so it wants to talk to the same, wants to retrieve or wants to access or wants to store. So that is where the file storage will come into the picture. There's something called as Azure Queue Storage, which is normally comes under asynchronous messaging queue, we call it as. Now you have two application called as application A and application B. Now application A considered as the one who is like application A wants to talk to the application B now. Now, how does it communicate? That is where the Azure Queue Storage comes into the picture, which passes those message through those queues, and those queues would process those requests. It goes to the application B, and application B would start serving those requests. That is where Azure Queue Storage will come into the picture. There's something called as Azure Table Storage, which is storage service that stores non-relational structured data. Okay, that's a one thing. Or you can also call it a structured NoSQL data. That is a one unique service provided by Azure. Now, the characteristics of these things is durable. So what is durable? Which means that your data, whatever data you are going to store, which would which remain intact all the time, right? There would be no degradation considering the data. The secure, the kind of security in terms of the encryption and in terms of the role-based access control that makes it easy for you to secure your data. Scalable, as I said before multiple times, which is nearly unlimited storage space. The managed, everything would be managed by Azure itself, because you do not have to worry about the storage devices. You do not have to worry about the what I call the facilities, or you do not have to worry about or manage the corruption of the data or corruption of the storage devices itself. Accessible, you would be able to access it via HTTP or HTTPS protocol. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. When it comes to the mobile, now which do provide solution for developers who would be able to create mobile backend services for iOS, Android, and Windows apps quickly and easily. Features that used to take time and increase project risk. So these are the things which is associated with the mobile. And other features of these services include offline data synchronization, connectivity to on-premise data, broadcasting, like if you want to broadcast push notification, that is where this will come into the picture. Auto scaling to match the business needs. That is the most important thing. The auto scaling or a dynamic scaling will come into the picture. Now, let's see about databases over here. Now, when it comes to Azure, Azure do provide different databases, starting from Cosmos DB, that is a NoSQL database. Now, it also provides Azure SQL database, and everything is fully managed. And when you look at the Azure Cosmos DB, which is globally distributed database that supports NoSQL option, that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. Now, Azure Database for PostgreSQL. So that's one of the open source database which is available in the market, that is also supported by Azure. And there's something called a SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machine that is going to host enterprise SQL Server apps in the cloud. And these are some of the database solution, and you would be able to like use database migration service also from on-premise to your cloud. And there's something called as Azure Cache for Redis. How many of you know about Cache? Any guesses on Cache and what do we require it? How many of you know about caching mechanism? Okay, so when it comes to the cache, what it does, improve the performance, it is going to store the most recent data, okay, or most frequently accessed data in its storage, so that your operating system or the application do not have to go to the like database every time, because that is where it is going to increase the stress or increase the load, right? So that is how the caching mechanism will come into the picture. Let me plug in a charger. Just a moment, give me 10 seconds of time. Okay, there is something called as a web. Like if you want to develop your application or if you want to host your application as a developer, is the one important thing to keep in mind is there is something called as Azure App Service. That's a platform based or a platform as a service. So you would be able to use it effectively to create powerful cloud-based web application. All you have to do is focus on your development. No need to worry about underlying infrastructure. So that's the one thing. There's something called as Azure Notification Hubs, where you would be able to send push notification to any platform from the backend. So that is one of the thing. And when it comes to the IoT, it offers the different solution and services for IoTs also. There's something called as IoT Central and fully managed global IoT software as a service solution that makes it easy to connect, monitor, and manage IoT assets at scale. If you have a IoT devices across, you would be able to manage, that is like one centralized hub to manage all these IoT devices. That is where the governance and management will come into the picture. You would be able to connect, monitor, as well as manage. And Azure IoT Hub, once again, there is something called as IoT Edge, which is fully managed service that allows data analysis models to be pushed directly onto the IoT devices, which allows them to react quickly to state changes. So like if you want to send some notification or push some changes to the end devices, that is where IoT Edge will come into the picture. Now let's talk about the big data. Now even Azure has a different services which can be used for the big data too. Now Azure Synapse Analytics and Azure HT Insight, there's something called as Azure Databricks. For artificial intelligence, if you are interested in artificial intelligence, you can use this Azure machine learning services as well as Azure ML Studios. Those are the tools available. And when it comes to the service name, and we have something for vision, speech, knowledge mapping, Bing search, natural language processing also. Now let's talk about the DevOps. Now, how many of you know about DevOps? How many of you know about DevOps? What is your understanding on DevOps? Okay, so there's something called as a DevOps. Whenever you get a time, please explore it. And Azure provide a service called as Azure Tools, Azure DevOps, where that's a one centralized place where you would be able to use a different tools right from the project management, right from your version control and to your build and deployment process. That is where the pipeline will come into the picture. Okay, you can see the Azure DevOps use development collaboration tool such as high performance pipeline, free private Git repositories, configurable Kanban boards, and extensive automated and cloud-based load testing, formerly known as Visual Studio Team Service. There's something called as Azure Dev Test Labs, and quickly create on-demand Windows and Linux environment to test or demo application directly from deployment pipeline. It is just like, okay, you have developed a new application. What happens is whenever you develop a new application, you have to build it in order to compile it and in order to package it, right? So that is where now in order to do that, you would require a server. That is where Azure Dev Test Labs will come into the picture. So that is about the DevOps. As you can see here, DevOps brings together people, process, and technology by automating software delivery to provide continuous value to your user. Just a moment, guys. So that is where in order to bring the people, process, and technology together to deliver a product with the highest quality and faster time to market, that is where you would require DevOps, which provides wide variety of tools in order to follow the proper process for the organization. Let it be agile, let it be like when it comes to a DevOps methodology, you would be able to use incorporate agile also, a Scrum also. So when it comes to the Azure like project management tool, you would be able to see these processes, like which process you need to go for your product development. If you want to go with the basic process, you want to go with the Agile, or you want to go with the Scrum. You can integrate repositories and application test. When it comes to the DevOps, the most important thing you have to keep in mind is continuous integration and continuous delivery. So that's the two important things when it comes to the continuous integration and delivery, and which comprises of different life cycles over there. Take an example of like continuous build, continuous integration, or let's say continuous monitoring or continuous deployment. So these are the things which will come into the picture. So in order to automate all this process and makes it easy for the individual as well as the organization, Azure DevOps comes into the picture. Now let's see the how, like, I think all of you have created Azure accounts, right? So you can see the Azure account. Now, whenever you create an Azure account for learning purpose, whenever you activate a sandbox, I'll tell you when to activate the sandbox. It will create a subscription for you, the learning subscription for you. And based on that, once you have the subscription, in order to group the related resources, we have something called as a resource group. And we have a resource groups where you would be able to like group the related resources can be your database, it can be your storage, it can be a virtual machine, it can be based on your environment, or it can be based on your application. And I think all of you have created Azure account, right? If I'm not wrong. Sure. If I'm not wrong, all of you have working Azure accounts, right? Perfect. And yes, the student accounts. We talk about the sandbox later part. And we are going to use one of the case study throughout the session. Okay. The case study, we would be using Tailwind Traders as one of the case study. They are the fictitious home improvement retailers. Okay. It operates retail hardware stores across the globe and online. Now, in order to facilitate their business, or in order to run their business, now how Azure is going to provide a solution. That is the most important thing associated with this. Now let's take an example of this Tailwind Traders. Okay. Now you can see Tailwind Traders currently manages an on-premise data center that hosts companies' retail website. Now, why they are going with the on-premise data center? Because it was already existing. And in order to manage their global business, since they have their retail shop across the world, so they have their website, they have their application, and which is hosted on their on-premise data center. The data center also stores all of the data and streaming video for its application. So they would be having a promotional videos or advertisement videos, and everything would be stored on this. The IT department is currently responsible for all of the management tasks for its computing hardware and as well as the software. Okay, here on-premise data center, let's say the Tailwind, what's that, Traders is managed by you people, or which is owned by you. Now, who is responsible for managing it? The IT department, right? Now, if you are a head of IT department, and you would be responsible for it, and you need to hire the people with the right skill set, and you need to make sure that there won't be any service disruption, right? So that's the most important thing you have to keep in mind. For example, IT specialist for companies IT department, your IT team handles the procurement process to buy a new hardware. Now, if your business is scaling, and if you are, let's say, the Tailwind Traders are expanding in India region, okay, and it comes to India in a different states of India. Take an example of Hyderabad, Telangana, or Karnataka, or any other place. They would require, they need to scale their data center, right? If they want to scale, they need to procure the new hardware. In terms of buying it, install and configure the software. See, not just procuring the hardware would be enough. So once after buying this hardware, you need to configure it and make it work. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. And once it is tested successfully, and you would be able to deploy everything to the data center. That is the most important thing to keep in mind. So these management responsibilities, so as I said before at the beginning of the session, when it comes to the on-premise data center, it comes with the administrative overhead, right? So like you have that burden on you, and it's your responsibility. You have to be accountable for whatever happens over there. So that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. Now, these management responsibilities create some obstacles for delivering your application to your users in a timely fashion. As an IT pro, you will realize it would be advantageous to have server, storage, database, and other service immediately available. Now, see, there is like, if you want to scale your business, you need to procure, configure, install, everything comes to the picture. Now, once you start working in IT, you realize that managing these things would be a tedious task, and you need to have an approach so that it would be available to you whenever you require. That is on demand, right? On demand. So whenever you require additional server, it must be available to you. So that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. You want to easily start a new service or add a services to your solution. So that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. So we would be using this example throughout. Okay. Now, in other units of learning this module, you have, okay, so that's the one thing you have to keep in mind. Now let's see how Azure would help you and in order to solve these problems. Okay. Now what we are going to do is, so I would expect an answer from all of you, and let me know before we break. First question is, let me read out true or false. You need to purchase an Azure account before you can use any Azure resources. Is it true or false? Okay, it says false. Okay, let me select a wrong answer and let me see the explanation from AWS. So what is meant by cloud computing? What is meant by cloud computing? What is the answer? Okay, the first answer, delivering a compute service over the internet. Okay, which of the following is not a feature of cloud computing? The limited pool of service. For the first question, I have selected the wrong one. And let's see what it says. You can use a free Azure account or Microsoft Learn Sandbox. Yes, we are talking about Microsoft Learn Sandbox. You do not have to create an account. All you have to do is you just have to activate the sandbox and start using it. We're going to see it how exactly to use it. And yes, that's the right answers. You can see the answer. That's correct. Cloud computing is delivery of computing services over the internet, which is otherwise known as a cloud. That's an answer for the second one. The third one is the cloud offers nearly limitless pool of raw compute, storage, and networking components to help you innovate the novel user experience quickly. So that's a one thing you have to keep in mind. Okay. So I think that's it for now. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Did you guys understand the concept? That is more important. Great. Good to see the confirmation though. And you have lots of learning going forward, and keep up this energy and the zeal to learn. That is most important. And thank you so much for joining, and we'll take a quick 1 hour lunch break and we'll be back at 2:05. It's 1:05 now. We'll be back at 2:05. Is it fine? Have a nice lunch, but don't fall asleep. It's a request from my end. So we know like afternoon session is always a pain. Thank you so much, and see you at 2:05. Bye-bye.